Hey, welcome to my presentation on the ignorant and not so ignorant application of ungrading principles to large, highly technical courses. I'm Joel Ellsworth. I'm an assistant professor of practice in the mechanical engineering department. And presentations always start with an introduction. So I am Professor Joel Ellsworth. I introduce myself to my students as Professor Ellsworth, and some of them wonder, why do I not introduce myself as Doctor? And that is a long story, but the short answer is I don't actually have a PhD, so I don't feel it appropriate to introduce myself as Dr. Ellsworth. I let them call me that because it's a title in academia, but I don't introduce myself that way. But I do get to teach. I have a master's degree and 11 years of hands-on engineering experience at the NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center. And so I get to teach. And what do I teach? I teach material science, fluid mechanics, professionalism and ethics, and machine design. As you notice, those are large class sizes, 80 to 160 students. And so I'm pretty busy in my teaching. A shorter way to answer what do I teach is I teach large, highly technical courses in mechanical engineering. Now, I like mechanical engineering, and I like engineering in general because of the precision. Answers are generally right or wrong based on the laws of physics and not personal opinions or philosophies. And a student says, hey, you graded this wrong, I can go back and say, well, no, here's the equations and this is how it works. And show that, yeah, this is the way it really should be. Okay, so that's an introduction to me. What we're talking about today is ungrading. And when I started teaching 6 years ago, I didn't know what ungrading was. But ungrading, in short, is a teaching technique with its focus on feedback and improvement rather than scores. And most examples you will see for ungrading are on writing assignments, which is all well and good. Tools are useful where they're useful. But this quote from John Spencer I liked, so that when grades are gone, students are less likely to worry if they're doing the things the right way and more likely to think outside the box. In engineering, there are lots and lots and lots of right ways to do things. And as a professor, I might teach one or two of them. So there's ways to encourage students to approach problems in multiple directions. It's usually a good thing, right? Cool thing about ungrading, as with a lot of teaching techniques, it's been shown to improve student outcomes, but it comes at the cost of more time invested by the professor, which now is not unique in improving student outcomes. The more time we put into it, the better students have a tendency to do. Nice things that if you have small classes in certain fields, this is sometimes a change in how your time is invested rather than a change in the quantity of time invested. So that's kind of cool. But I'd heard about those ungradings and the basic concept and thought, hey, that sounds fabulous. I'd love to have my students learn better. With a class size of 100 plus students, I didn't think it was feasible to provide individualized feedback on multiple assignments throughout the course of the semester. It just seemed like an impossibly high burden to approach, right? And additionally, for the binary nature of most homework questions in engineering, the answer is either right or wrong. I didn't see a good way to apply ungrading to my courses. But in the spring of 2023, I attended the ETE Sparkshop on ungrading and realized that I was already doing it in my classes, which is kind of odd because I went to it thinking, yeah, I wonder if they'll be able to teach me anything about how to do this in my large, highly technical courses, and found that I had already applied some of the principles. So let's go from application to my ignorant application. Let's go back to spring of 2020. This is pre-COVID. This is my second year teaching. I took over Dr. Fulcom's machine design course when he retired. And props to Dr. Fulcom. It was a well-developed course. He had extensive lecture slides. He called it death by PowerPoint. And yeah, I could literally take his course and run with it and just teach the course the exact same way he taught it and just keep teaching the course the same way. One of the big things about this was that there were homework assignments after pretty much every lecture And in his course, they're due at the start of the next lecture. So meet 3 times a week. You'll have 3 homework assignments due. Well, by the start of the 3rd lecture, I had over 300 assignments in a pile to grade. And between that and my other courses, well, Dr. Folkman had a TA to grade for him and hold office hours to help students out. I couldn't find anyone qualified to serve in this position. It's a junior year course, which means you have to get senior year students or grad students. And the only people who get to apply for the position were entering freshmen who obviously couldn't hold office hours for a junior year course. Right, so I was overwhelmed. Right, the 2 other large courses, and I was not going to be able to keep up with it grading 150 assignments 3 times a week. And I went looking, and the necessity of finding a way to handle this, found a solution in the form of quizzes on Canvas. And you say, really? Canvas quizzes? I'm like, yeah, I converted all the remaining homework assignments into Canvas quizzes. And so I've got this problem for one of my first few assignments. Got this counter shaft with a pulley. Force goes in, force goes out, we get torque. But this problem gets solved, right, and put into Canvas. So each question from the book gets broken down to sub-questions that would walk students through one of the possible ways to solve the problem. Right, so there's my solution for parts A and B. And then they would show up in Canvas as this. So what's the tension on pulley T1, which is this guy here? And solve for that. What's the force here? And you'd put your answers in the box, expressed in pounds force. And so I'd look for 60 for T1 and 400 for T2 with some reasonable few percentage margin of error for calculation differences. And students would be able to submit their answers that way. And I wouldn't have a massive stack of homeworks to grade. Right? So great, that's all well and good, but going back to the purpose of this presentation, what does that have to do with ungrading? Well, it depends. Now that I've made the assignments, or put the questions into Canvas as a quiz, how do I handle that quiz? If I take that quiz and say, okay, you have 1 attempt to do this, it is due before class starts, good luck, then it's no different than any other assignment, except it's submitted through Canvas. I didn't do it that way. I let my students immediately see their scores, which if you hand them a paper assignment, you might, if you're lucky, get it back in a week or 2. Right? Instead, they could immediately see their scores and know which questions they missed and which questions they didn't. And I also allowed them unlimited attempts before the deadline, which instead of being the start of the next class, I made midnight after the next class. So they had a chance to try the homework and then ask me questions during the next lecture, which as a student, I would have loved to have had that opportunity. Right, so letting students immediately see their scores provides feedback on each sub-question. Yes, it's binary. You either got it right or you didn't. But you know whether or not you got it right. And with unlimited attempts, this allows you to go back and say, oh, well, I missed this question. Let me try it again. Oh, hey, this one worked. Lets you improve your score. And you could keep submitting it until you got full points in the assignment, or you were so completely lost that you said, no, there's no point in trying to try this again. I'm going to go to class and ask Professor Ellsworth for help on this, because if I'm this stymied by this, other students are too, and I shouldn't be embarrassed to ask questions, right? But by providing that feedback in each sub-question and allowing for improvement on each and every assignment, this is ungrading, right? I discovered this as a desperate, inexperienced professor, but it worked. Let the students see what they did wrong, or see which ones they did wrong, and try again to fix it on every assignment. Okay, so there we go. There's ungrading to a large technical course. But I wasn't done yet, because I had other stuff that I wanted to improve, right? Now, if you've ever taught a large class, you love the idea of a multiple choice exam, because it makes it easy to grade. You go through and all you have to do is see whether marked A, B, C, or A, B, C, or E, and so great. And if I made it a quiz in Canvas, I wouldn't have to grade at all. That's fabulous from a teacher's perspective. From a student's perspective, I strongly disliked multiple choice exams. part of it was there's no partial credit for the work that I had done correctly. And I ran into several professors who gave multiple choice exams where the questions were coupled together, such that if you made a mistake on problem 2, you missed problems 3 and 4 automatically because you had the wrong information going into those questions. Right. So I wanted to overcome those 2 problems. Okay, so was there a way to improve on this? Well, yes. Decoupling the questions is easy. It takes a little more work up front, and sometimes it makes the questions a little silly, because one of the ways to decouple it is you say, okay, calculate this value, the stress in this beam, in question 1. In question 2, assuming you calculated this value in question 1, not the same value, not any of the possible options, but assuming you calculated this stress value, what's the expected lifetime in a fatigue setting for this part, right? So you can decouple questions, make each question independent of all the others, and still step through the exam questions the same way we did the homework questions. So now the students are prepared for the exams by nature of the homework questions that they've been doing anyway. Okay, so that we can decouple the questions. It takes a little more work up front for me. Not a big deal. But how do you give partial credit on a multiple choice exam? And I came up with a solution to that one too. And also, how can you let students show improvement? Because part of ungrading is to give feedback and give the opportunity to improve and replace a bad score. Right? So I adjusted my testing policy. And I have when I've talked to people, I've never run into another professor who was running exams this way. But most professors I've talked to like the idea. But my midterms exams go like this. Students go to the testing center, they take the exam on a hard copy, and the testing center scans it, and I pick up their hard copies. Okay, so the students take their exam on the hard copy. When they're finished, they submit their multiple choice answers via a quiz on Canvas, and then they hand their exam to the testing center. It gets scanned, and then eventually, once all the exams have been completed, we go into class one of the days after the exam, and I distribute the hard copy exams to the students, and everybody gets to review their exam alongside the solutions or how I solved the problem. And if the student says, oh, I did this all right, I punched it wrong in my calculator, they can get partial credit for that, so long as they showed their work. And at the end of class, all the exams have to be returned. They can review them in my office anytime they like, but they do need to be returned at the end of the day or the end of the class period. And if they want me to review a question, they write the question number they want me to review on the cover sheet of the exam, hand it back into me, and I go through it and I can award partial credit for those questions. Right. So the opportunity to improve is based off of, at the end of the semester, I offer a retake for all the midterms. In the material science, each midterm gets a separate retake. In machine design, I do a combined retake, but it can replace the previous exam score if it's better. Right. So some advantages of this. Right. For one, students get an immediate score. They get feedback as to how they did as soon as they log into Canvas after they leave the testing center, or maybe as soon as they hit the submit button. Right. From my perspective, I only have to grade questions that are petitioned. I don't have to grade every question on every exam, which is nice because it significantly reduces my grading workload. Right. And when the students petition, they can get partial credit. So the advantage to the students. And the students review their own exams. They get feedback of looking through their exam. Right. And at the end of the semester, they can retake those exams, replace bad scores, and that allows for the opportunity of improvement. Again, this is another form of ungrading. Right, so they get the feedback of the immediate score, they get the feedback of reviewing their exams, going through and seeing how it should have been done, and then they have the opportunity to improve at the end of the semester when they retake the exam. And if a student knows how to do the engineering, knows the principles by the end of the semester, I am perfectly happy to erase the bad score they got in the middle of the semester, because if they know it at the end, great, they'll take it with them when they leave. Right. So I did those things. And then I attended the Sparkshop, And I realized that I'd already applied these ungrading principles, but the Sparkshop also challenged me to actively apply these principles to another course. And I thought about it, and my material science lab course associated with the material science class, seemed an appropriate place because the students are evaluated mostly on written lab reports. Great, written assignments. So I updated the lab report policy. Right. Grading comes back in two forms. One is reports are graded in binary fashion. They're either complete and receive full credit, or incomplete and receive no credit and get feedback. Now that feedback also has a point total for convenience of grader and showing what's most important to revise and correct. But the students then have 1 week after they receive that complete or incomplete rating. If it's incomplete, they have 1 week to revise and resubmit. And if it still comes back incomplete or unacceptable, they'll get another week to revise and resubmit until they get good lab reports. Right? And as it works out, each of those reports is worth about 10% of the final grade. Right? And I use a quiz at the beginning of the course to verify that students understand the policy and how this works, as well as some other course policies. And there's another question. Okay, so I'm changing how this works. How do students respond? I love the Far Side comics sometimes, right? You can lead the horse to water, but can you make him drink? You can lead the students to an ungrading policy and the opportunity to improve their lab reports, but will they do it? Well, the results of this, for the vast majority of the students, the improvement in the lab report quality was faster, right? They'd get their first report back, see what they need to do, fix it, resubmit it, it would be approved, it would pass, and then they'd go to write the second lab report, and it'd be higher quality than it would have been without that feedback and without that additional time. And as you go through that semester, this is the first course where students are writing lab reports. The complexity of the lab report increases throughout the semester. And once they got the hang of it, then they could match with that increased complexity with their reports and would do really well. There were a few students that failed to resubmit any of the reports. And I don't know why. All I can say is that a quiz and course policy doesn't always prove an understanding of that policy. Have students get perfect scores on that quiz and then disavow all knowledge of one of the course policies. And so it's like, all right, well, you violated this course policy, so you've had an academic integrity violation report filed on you. You say you have no idea, have no knowledge of this, so who took the quiz for you? Let's file another report. That hasn't, well, it's almost happened, right? But some students didn't resubmit any reports, and one of the other lessons from this is that these non-traditional teaching techniques are challenging to some, and because it's different from what they expect, and students want things to be as they expect them to be. And sometimes it works out well for them, and sometimes it doesn't. So my summary, we really can't apply the ungrading principles to large technical classes or large technical content. The key is to supply the timely feedback and opportunity for improvement. This tends to be easier for writing assignments. If you're doing a writing course, that's where all the examples seem to come from. But in a technical class, we can provide binary feedback. No, this question's correct or not, especially in a stepwise process. So they say, oh, this step's wrong. Well, correct this step and see if the rest of them are good. If they are, then you'll know where you made the mistake. And it can be automated, which means you get immediate feedback, which was really awesome. My machine design course gets my highest teacher ratings and the most compliments from my students. And I really think it's because of the way I changed the homeworks. Dr. Folkman warned me that his death by PowerPoint slides might lower my teacher ratings. And I still do death by PowerPoint in the course. But I've tried to make it add a little more fun and some jokes into it. And students like the course, but I really think it has to do with the ungrading that I've applied in a way that the mechanical engineering students really understand. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions about how I did this or anything else, email me at joel.ellsworth@usu.edu, and we'll see you around campus.